Every house has an old landline collecting dust somewhere. Most of them are dead weight plastic and wire going nowhere. This one wasn't. Mark and Sarah Whitfield bought their dream house in Coulter's Gap, Tennessee in the fall of 2024. Cheap land an hour outside Nashville, more room than they'd ever had for their 10-year-old son, Eli. The house came furnished, mostly old furniture, water-stained wallpaper, and one thing the listing never mentioned. A rotary phone, bolted into the hallway wall, cord running straight into the plaster as it had grown there. Mark almost tossed it in the first cleanup pass. Figured it for decoration, something the last owners left behind because it wasn't worth hauling out. He set it back down on the table instead. Told himself he'd deal with it later. It was their second night in the house when the landline on the table rang. Nobody in that house had a landline account. Nobody had even found a working jack. Mark picked it up anyway, mostly out of confusion, and got a voice on the other end that sounded almost calm and polite. The person who was on the other end said, "Tell Eli to come inside. It's getting dark." Mark laughed it off. Some prank, maybe a neighbor with a scanner and a weird sense of humor. Then he looked out of the kitchen window. Eli was still out there, right where the landline person said he'd be, standing at the edge of the tree line and playing with a ball. The calls kept coming after that. Every day or night, sometimes twice. And every time the landline person at the other end knew things it had no business knowing. The stove was still on. The truck was unlocked. Small stuff at first. The kind of thing you'd almost call a favor if you didn't think too hard about how anyone could see inside a house from a mile away. Sarah started calling it the Watcher, like it was a joke between her and Mark. She stopped saying it out loud by the second week. The tone of the calls changed by the second week. They stopped sounding like warnings and started sounding like rules. Leave the back door unlocked. Keep the hallway light burning through the night. Stay out of the barn after 9. Small asks. Easy enough to follow for Mark, but he never asked why. The next day, Mark tried to trace it anyway. He called the Coulter's Gap telephone and exchange company and got a technician at the other end. The technician said there was no active line registered to that address. Hadn't been one in years. He was still talking when the call dropped clean, mid-sentence, and his phone went off. He went into deep thinking. He decided to follow the rules of that landline person because whoever the person is shouldn't harm his family. That night the phone rang again, and this time the voice wasn't asking anything. It told Mark he shouldn't have made that call. Then it told him to fix the porch light, which was sitting unscrewed on the railing, though neither of them remembered touching it. By the third week, they weren't questioning the rules anymore. They were just following them, the way you follow a doctor's orders you don't fully understand but are too scared to ignore. Then the voice asked for something bigger. Move Eli into another room of the house tonight, not his own. Mark and Sarah stood in her son's doorway a long time that night, watching him sleep. Sarah told Mark that this had gone far enough, that it was time to stop playing along with whatever sick game this was. They didn't move him. After some time, they found everything normal and went asleep. At 6:14 in the morning, the phone rang one last time, and the voice on the other end wasn't asking or warning anymore. It said 4 words, flat and final. "I told you not to test me." Then the line went dead in Mark's hand, and somewhere down the hallway, a door that had been shut for hours creaked and opened on its own. Mark went to Eli's room, but he was not there. Sarah and Mark started looking for Eli in the whole house. They found Eli in the backyard, barefoot in the frost, standing dead still and facing the tree line like he was waiting for something to come out of it. He didn't remember walking there. When Mark asked him, "Why are you standing here?" Eli said someone told him to stand here. Nobody answered the phone after that night. Mark spent the next day doing what he should have done from the start, following the cord out through the wall, underground across the property line, out into an empty field nearly a mile from the house. It ended at a single telephone pole, leaning, rotted, forgotten by everyone except whatever had been using it. He called the utility company one more time, and this time the answer came fast, almost rehearsed. The technician of the company said that line had been disconnected since 1991. There was nothing out there. Hadn't been for over 30 years. Mark stood at the base of that pole longer than he'd admit to Sarah later. There were names carved into the wood, old ones, fresh cuts, clean edges like they'd been carved yesterday. Ellie's name was written there. Mark rushed to the house and told Sarah about the telephone pole. They decided to leave the house forever. Mark, Sarah, and Eli shifted to an apartment which is in a small town in Tennessee. But whenever Mark looks at any telephone pole, his body freezes. So here's a question worth sitting with after you close this video. If your landline rang right now, but you know you don't have any landline account and neither your family, and the voice on the other end knew exactly what you were doing in this exact second, would you pick it up? If the answer's yes, you should follow the ShiverPlace before you find out what happens after you say hello.
Subscribe for more horror content.